Final Fantasy X is a massive game, and it's filled with side quests to keep players entertained for a long time. As a kid, I've only done a couple of these because it takes so long to complete them, and the one I was never able to finish was the monster arena located in the Calmlands. I remember trying my hand at fighting one of the bosses you can unlock, Espada, and being completely destroyed without dealing any meaningful damage. While I decided that this challenge was too much for me, I would eventually watch others on YouTube clear it with ease. However, some go even further to complete this side quest and beat the game in a single sitting. And that, my friends, brings me to the topic of this video, where we'll take a look into why it takes just under 20 hours to complete this category, and some of the history that's involved with it. So what does this quest entail, exactly? Well, the owner of the monster arena has gathered all of the fiends from across Spira for those who want to hone their battle skills. Unfortunately, the owner screwed something up and all of the fiends he captured escaped from his captivity. So the task of the player is to use weapons that the owner provides and capture all of these monsters to restock his arena. However, it's not enough to capture one of each fiend in the game, because if you want to fight one of the game's hardest bosses, you will need to capture 10 of each monster in Spira. Completing all of the captures in an overworld area, or capturing monsters from a certain species will unlock different bosses in 3 different categories. These are the Area Conquest, Species Conquest, and Original bosses. Some of these bosses are easier, like the boss I mentioned earlier. Then there are others that seem impossible to defeat, like Nemesis. Nemesis has a massive pool of 10 million HP, high stats in every attribute, and attacks that will deal nearly 100,000 damage to party members. Now, for those of you who are familiar with the game, you already know the easiest way to deal with this. The Aeon Yojimbo is known for his ability to cut down nearly any boss in the game with the power of money. His ability, Zamato, can be used to instantly defeat Nemesis and many of the other arena bosses, letting players forego the most absurd amount of time that goes into the fights. The Nemesis run on the HD remaster does exactly this, and while it's a valid way to defeat these bosses, it also feels as if one would be taking the easy way out by using Yojimbo. That's why we'll be directing our attention to the PS2's NTSC release, where this method is not used. This is due to Zamato only having a chance to be used in a pool of other abilities Yojimbo has at his disposal. The action Yojimbo takes is based on a hidden value called motivation. This value is affected by the amount of money that he was paid, a compatibility parameter that's influenced by several actions, the Zamato resistance of the enemy, whether or not his overdrive gauge was full when he was paid, and finally a random number between 0 and 63 being added to the resulting value. If the final number is over 80, Yojimbo will use Zamato. The values for many of these were increased in the international and HD remaster versions of the game, making it much easier to use the ability. In the PS2 version, it could take many tries to see a Zamato. Thankfully, there's an overpowered ability in the PS2's NTSC release called Quick Hit, which brings the user's next turn very far up in the turn order. The move can be used repeatedly to great effect, giving the player several turns in a row. This has a very minor delay and only costs 12 MP to use. In the international and HD remaster versions, the MP cost was increased to 36 and the ability was given increased turn delay, meaning that the move can be used less times before the enemy has their turn. With these things in mind, the ability isn't viable in the Nemesis HD remaster category. Now, the strategy to defeat Nemesis does take more than abusing a single ability, so let's look at how runners reach the fight in the first place. In a post on the Speed Demos Archive forum back in January of 2013, Johann Howitzer explains this exact concept when planning out how to beat Nemesis as fast as possible. He goes on to talk about Death Strike equipment being necessary to capture fiends quickly, as it has an instant kill chance when attacking. He also brings up the stats, items, and other equipment that are needed, particularly the celestial weapons that are essential for beating these super bosses. Each character in the party gets their own unique weapon, and have several effects which includes breaking the 9,999 damage cap. Abilities on armor are just as important, with Johann wanting auto haste for more turns and auto phoenix to have characters automatically use phoenix downs when others die. To get some of these equipment abilities, players will need to consume items to activate them. A lot of these items are obtained from the bosses in the monster arena, but others are earned from various parts of the game, so some grinding for items would need to be done. As for stats, there's a particular focus on strength, and agility to ensure the party deals enough damage and gets enough turns to defeat Nemesis. This route looks to nearly cap out the strength stat at around 255 and have agility reach 98, giving Johann a good chance at defeating Nemesis without any issues. As for characters, Tidus is a no-brainer since the end of his spear grid has quick hit, Yuna is brought in for Aeon summons since they're able to break the damage cap as well, and Riku comes in with the Mix Overdrive ability to provide essential buffs to the party. Now, a big barrier when it comes to defeating Nemesis is the sheer amount of levels you need to get any of these stats. Thankfully, Johann had a workaround for this, and it's a pretty clever one. The idea was to get triple AP weapons with 3 slots, then add overdrive to AP and triple overdrive to those weapons. Then, he would set Tidus's overdrive mode to Stoic, so he'll generate gauge when he takes damage, and then set Riku and Yuna's overdrive mode to Comrade, allowing them to generate overdrive when Tidus takes damage. After that's set up, the idea is just to go to the Dawn Tomberry fight and attack with Tidus. The boss will counter with Karma and instantly kill him. After a certain number of turns, the player can just flee and then you cash out the AP you earned. This converts out to 9 times AP for everyone, and it is absolutely broken how fast you can grind out levels with this method. Johann worked offline on a segmented session of the game, and defeated Nemesis with the in-game timer sitting at 51 hours and 18 minutes in February of 2013. 10 months later in December of that same year, he would take to his live stream on Twitch to attempt the run. While his original time was over 2 days of in-game time, he was confident that it would not take that long in his live attempt, with him mentioning in his post that his estimate for a full run was 24 hours, with a really good time being close to 20 hours. However, he wouldn't even come close to beating this goal, because on December 8th of 2013, he completed the Nemesis run with a time of 31 hours, 45 minutes, and 17 seconds. Now, don't get me wrong, this was an incredible feat of not only planning and use of game knowledge, but also endurance. There are few people who are willing to stay up longer than a day, and even fewer than that who use that day to beat a game as fast as they can. Johann was a titan, and the speedrunning community was in awe, regardless if he met his goal or not. While Johann's run was great, there was a lot of time to cut off in both the route and the execution. Losing progress and needing to attempt the boss fights again were the main offenders here, but RNG when trying to capture monsters was another issue as well. You can imagine the frustration when trying to complete an area's captures and one of the enemies just won't show up for you. With this in mind, it was only a matter of time before someone came to stand on the shoulders of this titan, and it would be a top speedrunner of the game by the name of Sereth who decided to challenge the category next in 2015. Back in the day, it was common to see speedrunners race each other using the site Speedruns Live, or SRL for short. Some races were for competitive reasons, with runners earning SRL points that improved their rank on the game's race leaderboard, and other races were organized on the spot for the hell of it, or even planned out in advance for categories that were off the wall like Nemesis. On August 8th of 2015, Sereth would race other runners in the community by the name of Palki and Gaddy Cool Sunshine in the Nemesis category. Sereth would finish this race with a time of 24 hours, 43 minutes, and 26 seconds, a massive improvement over Johann's first time. But he wouldn't stop there, because Sereth got 2 more PBs over the next month and a half, getting a time of 23 hours, 55 minutes, and 43 seconds on August 27th, and finally getting a time of 23 hours, 21 minutes, and 47 seconds on September 27th. Saving over 8 hours compared to Johann's run was a big deal, but we already knew this was possible thanks to Johann's initial estimates. However, Sereth's run was much more optimized than Johann's. Part of this had to do with how good Sereth was at the any percent run, with him being over an hour and a half faster than Johann's run after defeating Unaleska. The main difference in time after that comes from Sereth's route improvements, cutting out much of the fluff from the previous record. Johann overleveled his characters by a lot, resulting in some stats just being way too high. There's no reason to have the HP of party members maxed out if they're going to just die in one hit anyway, and that's just one of several examples. So less time was spent in both grinding and then the spear grid leveling characters in Sereth's run. The grind was also updated to remove some extra preparation before the Dawn Tomberry grind and added in a short level grind against the Cactuar King, which used a similar method to Dawn Tomberry. The optional Aeons were cut as well, not only because they were slow to get, but also because Yuna wasn't being brought into the Nemesis Gauntlet, as Sereth chose to use Auron instead. In the Nemesis fight, Everyone has quick hit in their abilities, leaving the boss with minimal turns during the encounter. However, the boss still gets turns, and it's possible he'll wipe the party if players are unlucky. So in order to avoid this, Sereth uses Riku's overdrive to mix Hyper Mighty G, giving the party auto life and preventing a reset on the fight. While he didn't have the best RNG on capturing monsters in his 2321, he still executed everything else fairly well, setting this as the new standard that future runners would need to overcome. Like any long category though, it would be a little while before someone could challenge that time. Johan was far removed from Nemesis at that point, and none of the other runners racing with Sereth would top that record. I guess that's why they say if you want something done, you gotta do it yourself. So in April of 2016, Sereth was back at it again with a Nemesis attempt in which he was doing very well for the most part. After falling behind in the Nemesis gauntlet, he was only 7 minutes ahead at that point. However, he was still on pace to finish up just ahead of his record, and only needed to get through the last section before the final bosses.
Instant encounter. God damn it. Oh, this is gonna be tragic. Oh, this is tragic. Oh, this is tragic.
Nearly 23 hours into the run, Sereth gets ambushed by a great Malboro, and with the use of bad breath on the party, it inflicted many status ailments, which includes confusion, making party members attack each other. That marked the end of Sereth's attempts at Nemesis at that time, and it would be left to someone else to try and overcome the current record. In February of 2016, Final Fantasy series runner Mafunian would take up the Nemesis category as his next project after doing work on Final Fantasy VIII. His first recorded time came in at just under 25 hours, a pretty good time to start out, and while he'd have a 10-month break from any new personal bests in the category, on December 10th of 2016, Mafunian would finally come out on top with a 23-hour, 15-minute, and 32-second run. This barely beat out Sereth, just 6 minutes ahead of his time. This came from a little bit better luck in Maf's run that sealed the deal, and a change to include Kamari instead of Orin in the party leading up to Nemesis. Just a couple months later, however, Sereth would put his hat back in the ring, doing a race with Mafunian and taking the record back himself with the 23-hour, 7-minute, and 46-second run on February 20th of 2017. This would stand for just over 7 months, and this time, Mafunian didn't just beat the record, he absolutely crushed it. On September 24th of 2017, Maf set a new Nemesis record with the time of 22 hours, 24 minutes, and 35 seconds. Armed with his main character named Butts, Maf's late game was extraordinary. After the Dawn Tomberry grind, he started picking up time in the tens of minutes, peaking at nearly an hour ahead. It mainly came down to how fast he got his captures compared to Sereth in his last run. Remember, there's a ton of randomness when it comes to these captures and how fast runners can get them, and it wouldn't be too long before that was going to be a problem for anyone looking to take the record next. Unfortunately, neither Mafunian or Sereth would come back to get these records, as they both would eventually retire from running FF10 and streaming altogether. A couple more years pass, and the game's categories continue to evolve. Close to War's legendary push of the any percent category happens during this time, improving the record uncontested for almost 2 years straight. No Spear Grid was pushed down a good amount as well, and as for Nemesis, it would take another year and a half before notable activity would happen in the category. In 2018, a streamer by the name of Matayama would do his first runs of the remastered version of Final Fantasy X. This would eventually lead him into trying other categories, including the HD Remastered Nemesis category. In 2019, he would start doing runs of any percent on the PS2 version, and eventually found himself taking on the Nemesis category. That March, it was time for him to do attempts, and while his first run didn't end up working out, not long after that, he had a run that just went a bit further. Matayama was going up against a run that had pretty good RNG, with Mafunian capturing monsters with ease. However, Maruyama had something else to bring to the table, and for the first time in years, Nemesis was getting changes to the route. It turned out if runners focused all of their effort into Titus being the damage dealer, a ton of time could be saved compared to running through the spear grid and leveling 2 other characters. Compared to Mafunian's Don Tonberry grind, Maruyama's was 42 minutes shorter, and while there would be time loss elsewhere from this method, it was well worth the sacrifice. On March 27th of 2019, Maruyama would shatter the previous record with a time of 21 hours, 46 minutes, and 12 seconds. This was the beginning of a new age of runs for the category. So if you wanted the record now, it wasn't just about good RNG. You needed to come up with new ideas that could be used in the run. At this point, however, the PS2 Nemesis run was becoming less and less popular due to the increased time investment needed to finish the game. The HD remaster having Yojimbo to do all the dirty work is much more appealing than whacking Nemesis with a metal stick over and over. One of the top runners of the HD remaster in Nemesis by the name of Camper already had some records in that category. So it's no surprise that he not only set a PS2 record once, not twice, not 3 times, not even 4 times, but 5 times in a row. Getting better RNG with capturing monsters was a big deal, and pushed the time down to a point where it could be hard to say if any more improvements could be made. However, in the last record, there were a couple of changes to the route, including a strategy that several people in the community worked on putting together. In 2021, Grey Fox 1996, Rossi, and Crimson Inferno 9 were the main contributors to revealing all the aspects of randomness the game had under the hood. After months of work, an RNG tracker was made for Final Fantasy X speedrunning, allowing runners to manipulate many aspects of their run by finding a specific seed that matched what they were running with. This meant that runners could now manipulate what encounters they got and remove about any aspect of luck from the run. So on December 13th of 2021, Camper once again set a new record in the PS2 Nemesis category, and it was one of the biggest jumps since Seraph took the record all those years ago. The first ever sub 20 had been achieved. While the pre-Nemesis part of the route was faster than those who came before him, the real time save was from the removal of RNG from the captures, bringing this category to a level of optimization not seen before. This is the 19-hour time I promised you all in the beginning, but our story isn't done yet. Funny enough, the final run I'll be talking about in this video is the direct result of another finding I talked on a few videos ago. If you've seen the video, you'll recall that I talked about Final Fantasy X's biggest skip ever being discovered, one that bypasses the entirety of Mushroom Rock and saves tens of minutes. Named Terra Skip after the community member who found the exploit, this breathed new life into FF10 speedrunning as a whole, and while it took some time for this to be used in the Nemesis category, one runner would use this to get a new record just a month ago as of this video's writing. A runner by the name of Swede7, who already had experience running multiple categories in the game, would be the latest challenger that took the record for himself. On October 22nd, 2023, he'd finish a PS2 Nemesis run with a time of 19 hours, 31 minutes, and 57 seconds, improving the record by just over 14 minutes. This is where the record stands as of the posting of this video, and while there were some mistakes that prevented this run from being perfect, it will likely stand as the fastest time in the category for the foreseeable future. No matter how fast or slow these runs were, even just doing them is a huge feat of endurance and dedication, and I think that's something worth celebrating. If you enjoyed the video and want to see more content like this, consider subscribing because it really helps me out. If you want to learn more about the run, I left links to the resources in the description below. Stay hydrated, folks, and while you're here, click on the image in front of you to see another amazing speedrunning story.